Welcome to the I Can't Sleep podcast, where I bore you to sleep with my soothing voice, one fact at a time. Tonight, I want to help you fall asleep learning about Iroh and Zuko from the Avatar: The Last Airbender series. This episode's a bit of a departure from the usual format. I'm sharing a story about fictional characters whose lives were a little more intense than what we typically cover here. I've taken some creative liberties, and I'd love to hear what you think. Should I do more episodes like these? Let me know. For now, let's begin. Iroh, listed as Uncle in on-screen credits, is a fictional character in Nickelodeon's animated television series, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Created by Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, the character was voiced by Mako in the first 2 seasons, and due to Mako's death, by Greg Baldwin in the 3rd season and the sequel series, The Legend of Korra. Iroh is a very powerful firebender, i.e., he has the power to telekinetically create and manipulate fire. And he's a retired general of the Fire Nation. He is the elder brother of Fire Lord Ozai, the ruler of the Fire Nation, and leader of its campaign to conquer the other 3 nations. During the narrative of the series, he accompanies his exiled nephew Zuko on his quest to capture the series' protagonist Aang, to restore the young prince's honor and birthright. Iroh acts as a mentor who seeks to help his nephew become a better person than his father. Prince, later Fire Lord and Lord Zuko, also known as the Blue Spirit, is a fictional character in the same series. Created by Eric Coleman and designed by series creators Michael and Brian, is voiced by Dante Bosco in Avatar: The Last Airbender and Bruce Davison in The Legend of Korra, and portrayed by Dev Patel in M. Night Shyamalan's 2010 film The Last Airbender, and Dallas Liu in the 2024 Netflix live-action remake series. Zuko is the crown prince of the Fire Nation, the eldest child of his father, Fire Lord Ozai, and mother Ursa, and the older brother of Princess Azula and half-sister Kiyi. Before the events of the series, Zuko is permanently scarred and then banished from the Fire Nation by his tyrannical father. In order to restore his honor and right to the Fire Nation throne, Zuko is ordered to capture the Avatar, a spiritually powerful individual capable of bending all 4 elements, water, earth, fire, and air, and who could end the 100-Year War. Zuko is accompanied and advised in his search for Avatar Aang by his wise uncle, former General Iroh. At the beginning of the series, he is the primary antagonist, opposing Avatar Aang and his allies, as he seeks redemption for his father since he has been banished from the Fire Nation. Over time, however, Zuko loses faith in the Fire Nation's war, feels guilt for his crimes, and begins to sympathize with those the Fire Nation has oppressed through the time he has been in the Earth Kingdom, along with his uncle Iroh. In the later part of the animated series, Zuko redeems himself and eventually joins Aang, helping him learn firebending and fight his father in order to restore peace in the Four Nations. Zuko also comes to realize that Iroh has been more of a father to him than Ozai. Through Iroh's teachings, Zuko truly found his own path. He learned that his honor was never lost, and by embracing his true self, he chose to fight for what is right rather than what was expected of him. Iroh was born into the royal family of the Fire Nation, son of Fire Lord Azulan, and older brother to Ozai. Trained as a general and master of firebending, Iroh's path could have mirrored theirs. But over time, he became something else entirely. He was a general, yes, skilled in the art of firebending, yes, but at his core, Iroh held a quiet reverence for life. The kind of person who could sit in silence with a cup of tea and feel like that moment mattered more than any crown. Early in life, Iroh was expected to do great things. He led armies. He studied dragons. And for a while, he believed his destiny was to conquer the grand city of Ba Sing Se, a place many had tried and failed to take. He even came close. But something changed, something deep, a moment that gently pulled him away from war and ambition and back toward stillness. His son, Lu Ten, bright, young, and full of promise, was lost during that siege. And just like that, the fire in Iroh's heart began to shift. Not extinguished, just softened, tempered, like coals that warm a hearth rather than burn a battlefield. He returned home, not as a victor, but as a man seeking peace. And while others around him clawed for power, especially his younger brother Ozai, Iroh chose a quieter path. He stepped away from court life and titles and let the political winds blow right past him. He traded strategy maps for a teapot, a war room for a tea shop. But don't let this gentle manner fool you. This was a man who once earned the title Dragon of the West, a man who breathed fire and bent lightning, a man who, it was said, had slain the last dragons, though in truth he protected them. He had learned their secrets, not just how to bend fire, but how to bend it without hatred, without rage, with life, with breath, with balance. He was a master firebender who didn't crave battle. He sought something else entirely, harmony, and maybe a really good jasmine blend. When his nephew, Prince Zuko, was exiled from the Fire Nation, it was Iroh who followed, not because he had to, not because he was told to, but because he saw something in the boy, a fire that needed guidance, a heart that was hurting, and maybe, just maybe, a chance for the family to heal. Together they traveled the world, one chasing a destiny, the other offering wisdom in small, quiet doses. Zuko fumed. Iroh brewed tea. Zuko fought. Iroh played Pai Sho. And every once in a while, when the noise calmed down, Zuko listened. Iroh didn't walk like a warrior anymore. He walked like someone who had nowhere to be, and all the time in the world to get there. Even as the world kept shifting around him, empires rising and falling, battles raging, he moved through it like a man in a garden, careful, unhurried, peaceful. He and Zuko found themselves in the Earth Kingdom for a time, not as nobles, not as soldiers, just two ordinary people running a small tea shop, the Jasmine Dragon. And Iroh, well, he was in his element, literally. He had water boiling, tea steeping, and little moments of joy tucked into every day. There was something beautiful about it, simple, steady, unthreatening. You would never guess he once commanded legions, or held lightning in his hands. But even in this peaceful chapter, the past still knocked. Zuko wrestled with his choices, his destiny, his need for honor, whatever that meant. Iroh never scolded, he never forced, he simply offered space. A nudge here, a cup of ginseng there. And slowly, so slowly, it worked. Zuko began to change, not all at once, not loudly, but in small shifts, the kind Iroh knew best, the kind that matter most. There were moments of setback, of course, and one of the hardest came when Zuko, lost and hurting, made a choice that broke Iroh's heart. He sided with his sister Azula, and for a while, Iroh was alone. Captured, held in a prison cell, but even there, Iroh didn't crumble. In fact, he trained. Quietly, patiently, day after day. And when the time came, during a rare moment when firebenders lost their powers under a solar eclipse, he slipped away. No dramatic speeches, no shouting, just a man walking forward, stronger than ever. Eventually, Iroh rejoined the Order of the White Lotus, a secret society made up of philosophers, benders, and thinkers from all nations. Not soldiers, not politicians. People who believed in balance above all. With them, Iroh helped liberate Ba Sing Se, not to claim it, but to free it. That old vision from his youth, the one where he thought he'd conquer the city, it came true, just not the way he expected. And maybe that's the real lesson. Destiny doesn't always arrive the way you think it will. When the war ended and the chance to lead the Fire Nation was his, he declined. Power, again, was not the point. He believed in Zuko, believed the boy he once followed across continents was now ready to lead with wisdom. And so Iroh returned to what he loved most, his tea shop. He brewed tea, played music, laughed with customers. And if you look closely, you might catch a flicker of fire dancing at his fingertips, not out of anger or fear, but warmth, real warmth. We'll turn now to the young man Iroh mentored, a boy full of fire, confusion, and searching. And through his story, we'll see what happens when someone chooses a different path. Next, we meet Zuko. Zuko was born into a storm. Not a real one, though that did happen later, but the kind of storm made from expectations, family pressure, and the deep, aching need to be seen. As the son of Fire Lord Ozai and brother to Azula, Zuko grew up surrounded by power, fire, and formality. But even from a young age, something in him didn't quite match the world he was born into. He was softer, not weak, just more sensitive to the world around him. He noticed things, he felt things. And in a palace that worshipped control and dominance, that kind of heart had a hard time finding room to breathe. His sister Azula was brilliant, cunning, and almost frighteningly gifted in firebending. She was everything their father admired. Zuko, though, was different. He struggled to meet expectations, and when he questioned authority once, just once, he was cast out, banished. A prince turned fugitive, told he could only return if he captured the Avatar, a legendary figure long thought to be lost. It was, by all reasonable measures, a hopeless quest. But Zuko took it anyway, not because he believed he could succeed, but because he didn't know who he was without his father's approval. So off he went, across the seas, searching, not just for the Avatar, but for some version of himself he could live with. And through it all, Iroh was there, brewing tea, cracking quiet jokes, standing in the background, but never out of reach. At first, Zuko resisted his uncle's wisdom. He burned with frustration. His mission was everything. The Avatar had to be captured. His honor had to be restored. That word, honor, echoed in his mind like a bell, loud, relentless. But the more they traveled, the more Zuko began to see the world beyond his nation's borders. The villages caught in the crossfire, the families hiding from war, the quiet grief that lingered behind burned forests and broken homes. He didn't say it out loud, not yet, but something inside him began to shift. There were moments, brief ones, when he hesitated, when he spared a life instead of taking it, when he helped instead of harmed. He didn't always understand why, but Iroh did. Zuko was starting to question the story he'd been told. The story that said power meant fear, that bending meant domination, that loyalty meant silence. And like most people wrestling with deep truths, Zuko didn't change all at once. He made mistakes. He got angry. He pushed people away. But every once in a while, he listened. And in those moments, the fire in him flickered differently, not as a weapon, but as something that could light the way forward. There's a moment in every journey when the road splits. One path is familiar, well-worn, predictable. The other is uncertain, quiet, a little overgrown. Zuko stood at that fork. After months, maybe years, of chasing the Avatar, of trying to prove his worth, he found himself holding success in one hand and doubt in the other. He had captured the Avatar, or so he thought. He was given the chance to return home. He could have had his old life back, the palace, the title, the approval. But when he stood in that space back in the Fire Nation, surrounded by the cold glow of status, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like peace. It felt hollow. He tried to settle in. He tried to wear the old version of himself again, but it didn't fit. He missed Iroh, missed the tea, the jokes, the gentle nudges that had slowly made him feel like more than just a soldier or a son. He had betrayed that connection once, and it weighed on him more heavily than any exile ever had. As the days passed, the unrest in his soul grew louder than the applause around him. So he did something brave, not flashy, not loud, just brave. He left. He walked away from the comfort of lies and stepped into the discomfort of truth. He chose to do what was right, even when it was inconvenient, even when it meant facing the people he'd once fought against, even when it meant finding Iroh again and asking for forgiveness. That moment, simple, tender, was one of the clearest signs that Zuko had changed. He entered Iroh's cell, not as a prince, not even as a bender, just a boy who had lost his way and found his way back. Iroh, of course, didn't yell. He didn't scold. He just embraced him. And in that moment, all the fire and struggle and pride melted into something quieter, something softer, healing. Together they rejoined the world outside, not as fugitives this time, but as agents of restoration. While others planned battles, Zuko sought understanding. He asked questions. He listened. He opened himself to the pain he had caused and tried, truly tried, to make it right. When the final confrontation came, Zuko didn't fight for glory. He fought to stop the cycle, to break the chain of anger passed down through generations. He stood in front of Azula, not as her enemy, but as someone who wanted a different ending, a gentler one, a future not bound by fear, but by hope. And even when the fire flew around him and the storm raged overhead, his voice remained calm. He had learned from Iroh. He had learned from his mistakes. And finally, he had learned from himself. Zuko's fire wasn't gone. It had just reshaped, refined, like coals smoldering under a kettle, warm and steady. In the final part of this story, we'll see what kind of leader he chose to become and how peace, like tea, is best when steeped slowly. When the war finally ended, the sky didn't explode in fireworks. There were no trumpet blasts or parades through the streets. Just quiet. Stillness, really. And maybe, for the first time in his life, Zuko could hear himself think. He was crowned Fire Lord not with roaring pride, but with a kind of reverent uncertainty. He didn't know everything. He wasn't perfect, but he was ready to try, to listen, to lead with humility. Gone were the days of chasing shadows. Now came the dawn of rebuilding. The Fire Nation had done harm. There was no denying that. But under Zuko's rule, it would no longer hide from that truth. It would face it. It would learn. It would ask forgiveness. And it would change. He worked to undo the damage done during the war, reached out to the other nations, not as a ruler demanding loyalty, but as a friend offering peace. Sometimes that meant long conversations, sometimes silence. Sometimes it meant bubble tea. Yes, Iroh's influence was still alive and well. Zuko never forgot what it felt like to be lost, to carry anger that didn't have words, to believe love had to be earned through pain. So he made space for those who were still finding their way. He found his mother, reconnected with those he thought he'd lost. And when he wasn't in meetings or diplomatic circles, he was often found sitting with Iroh. No royal robes, no crown, just two people steeping leaves and watching the rain. The Fire Nation still had flames, yes, but under Zuko, those flames were no longer a threat. They were warmth, hearth, light. And Zuko himself, once a restless, stormy prince, had become a steady flame. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't need them. He had peace, a few scars, a bit of tea, and a future that stretched calmly ahead, like steam rising from a cup in the early hours of morning. So now, as the stories of Iroh and Zuko settle into stillness, maybe you feel something gently quiet in yourself too, a warmth, a soft exhale, like the final crackle of fire before it fades into embers. You've traveled far, and now there's nothing more to do. Just rest. Let the last of the story drift away like the steam into the air, and fall asleep while thinking about the gentle hush of rain. Happy sleeping.